In our hour of need, I call upon you to serve your king. Walk tall, my son. Here we have Regis. Today we're going to be looking at a KingsGlaive package for Opus 15 deck tech. And this is an Earth Lightning variant. I have tried both variants. I've tried Earth Lightning, I've tried Mono Lightning. I'll kind of touch on Mono Lightning just a little later, but for now, wanted to focus on Earth Lightning, and we're going to look at Regis as well as all of our new KingsGlaives. So Regis is really nice because he will reduce the cost of any KingsGlaive you control by 1. When I read that, I was like, that might be the main appeal of this card. It makes them all cheaper. And then in particular, if Regis is chosen by a summoner ability, you can sacrifice any Jobs KingsGlaive you have to completely cancel that effect. I didn't value that too highly when I first saw it, but in practice, I actually like it quite a bit. In particular, just because it doesn't just protect Regis, it cancels the effect entirely. So if someone puts down a Blaze backup and they shoot Regis and another KingsGlaive, you sacrifice whatever, it just cancels the entire effect. Or if they have any effect that chooses multiple forwards, multiple characters, as long as Regis is one of the ones being chosen, he can just shut the entire effect off entirely. His damage 3 ability is a real waste because it only gives him 1,000 power, which is good. I honestly think he should have naturally been a 9k, and I just wish he'd had something else for that damage 3. But, nonetheless. So, of course, if you're playing Regis, you've got to play new Nyx. Nyx and Regis, of course, want as many KingsGlaives as possible. Nyx can dump a KingsGlaive from the break zone to give himself 1,000 power first strike, and he can't be targeted by abilities. And then his big payoff is you can dump 5 KingsGlaive to pull a 15 forward of 5 or less straight from your deck right to the field. We will get into that more later, what targets he has. Obviously, you can pull out any 15 forward, but of course you want to try to go for those higher value 5 cost targets. So let's take a look at the new KingsGlaive we have, shall we? First is, personally, my least favorite one is that, and that is Axis. And this is the one nearly every other player I talk to, Axis is their favorite. When Axis hits the field, he's going to take the top 3 cards of your deck, put them into the break zone, and then at any time you can break Axis to pull any forward out of your break zone other than himself. I just don't like self-mill. I just don't. It's just not for me. So I won't lie. I almost always just throw Axis away for something else. But the idea is that if he hits the field, he's going to load up your break zone, hopefully with other KingsGlaive that then can be immediately used for Nyx or Regis. And the nice part is, one thing I do like is that he can pull back any forward. So if you put a bunch of forwards into your break zone, Axis can then immediately get it back, which is quite nice. He's really good as a defender because, again, you can block, pop the Axis, pull something back, etc. But it's just not for me. I am much more boring. I prefer something as like good old Tread here. Tread, who when he enters is going to give a 15 forward, 1,000 in Brave, and then just like Axis, he can immediately break himself, and then he'll give a forward 3,000 power in first strike to the end of the turn. Makes him a really good defender. You just chump block something, pop, buff Regis up by 3 in first strike, whoever it is. Really strong, and what I love is that Tread can become 0 if Regis is on the field, so you can just play him for free. So Tread is definitely more my speed. 2 of the backup Sonitus. These next ones are really just here to fill out the KingsGlaive numbers. I haven't used Sonitus' ability once. It's there if you want it, similar to Luce, who we'll see in a bit. You can pay 3, CP plus Udalms, ultimately 4, and you can just break a forward indiscriminately. Sonitus has the downside, he'll deal you a point of damage. Luce has the downside, he's going to let them draw a card. Most people seem to think the damage is better, but honestly, especially with the way this deck works and that you're using Regis and Nyx, you're basically sacrificing your KingsGlaives to protect them. I've never even really gotten to do the effect, because usually he's just getting pitched to save Regis one point or another. 3 copies of Pelna. You could adjust him to 2 and put Sonitus to 3 if you want, but like I said, since I don't use his ability too much, Pelna's ability can be used just by dulling Pelna and breaking him, and he's going to give 2,000 to all the 15 forwards, which is really nice. And then, what I also really like about Pelna, he will get reduced as long as you control a 15 character. So if you put Sonitus down turn 1, you can then just tap Sonitus to put down Pelna. Or if you control Regis, he's completely free. Regis is on the field, boom, you can just drop Pelna for free. That feels awesome. These are our new KingsGlaive. Backing them up, of course, is our old KingsGlaive. Libertus is here. Libertus, I think, has gotten a new breath of life off of this Regis, because him being a 4 cost as opposed to a 5 cost is a huge difference. Because what you can do is tap 2 backups, pitch a Nyx card, put down Libertus for 4, you'll get those backups back off of the Libertus and pull the Nyx back. So it didn't actually cost you anything. That feels awesome. Again, with 5, you always had to tap 1 extra backup, and then you wouldn't quite get your return. But at a 4, he feels awesome. And of course, he can just pull back any 15 character, which this deck is loaded with. 2 copies of Old Nyx. Sometimes he's the right card, other times not. He's going to cost you something up front that you have to put a KingsGlaive into the break zone, but obviously you've got more than enough to pick from, and then he can immediately break them. In particular, I actually do like this Nyx a lot with Regis, because if you use a KingsGlaive to protect Regis, so they target Regis, you put Pelna in the break zone to cancel the effect. Nyx saw a KingsGlaive go to the break zone, so Nyx's effect will trigger, which means you can either give Nyx haste, which is only matters the turn he comes down, but more importantly, you can then have him dull forward out of the way. So it can create this really fun scenario where, nope, protect Regis. Not only did I cancel that, because I put 1 away, Nyx is now going to dull 1 of your guys. And then 3 copies of Crow, who is still the best KingsGlaive as far as backups go. And let me put out Luce first, just to finish off where I talk about Crow in general. Luce, again, he's just kind of like the other Sonitus. I will only really ever use his effect if it's going to close the game out. Otherwise, he's usually getting sacrificed to Regis, or he's just there to fill out the KingsGlaive numbers. Now, why is Crow the best KingsGlaive? Because I think they kind of missed the boat with some of the design of this tribal, or whatever you want to call it, in that Crow is the only KingsGlaive that will get her effect regardless of how she goes to the break zone. So Crow can dull herself, break herself, and then she can choose a forward and dull it. And then it says anytime Crow goes to the break zone, you get to pull back a forward, which is great. So Crow is your best target for this Nyx and for this Regis, because if they target Regis and you put Crow in the break zone, not only are you canceling the effect, Crow now draws you back a forward. Unfortunately, they didn't design the rest of the KingsGlaives with this. So, for example, Pelna's effect, or Axis or Tread's effect, where they can put themselves in the break zone. You have to choose between putting Axis in the break zone to get that forward back, or using him to cancel Regis's effect. I really wish they had designed these all like Crow, so that regardless of how they go to the break zone, they would get that effect off. You could word that any way you want. You could say when Sonitus goes to the break zone, you may pay 3 or 4 or whatever. If you do so, deal them damage, yada, yada, yada. However you wanted to work, but I really wish that had worked. If that was the case, I think KingsGlaive could actually be a true force to be reckoned with. But unfortunately, Crow is the only one that will always get you that benefit regardless of how she goes. Nonetheless, that's the state of affairs we're in, so moving on. So here's all our KingsGlaive. And next we have Claris. He's just good to pull out a copy of Regis. Regis is incredibly important to this deck. I kind of undervalued it a little when I first saw the card, but like I said, it has really proved its worth, and I'll go into that a little more later. 2 copies of Cindy. Cindy is nice because she'll let you search for any 15 forward. I haven't really settled on what I grab. I almost always grab at least 1 Regis if I don't have it. And then often I'll either grab Nyx or I'll grab Glauca. Maybe I'll grab Ignis. It just kind of depends on the match, but Cindy's very good for that. And then Cindy can dull to give any of them Brave, or if you need to go for that final push, you can dull her, pay an Earth, boom, get 3,000 to all the 15 forwards on the board. 2 copies of the Class 10th Moogle. It's just a way to help you fix color fix. This deck is heavier on the Lightning than it is the Earth, because all the KingsGlaive are in Lightning. So it's kind of nice to just have a cheap way to get some Earth CP out. 1 copy of Prompto. You can absolutely switch this out for Shantoto. Shantoto is more reliable. I like Prompto just because, again, he fits the 15 theme, which I do appreciate. And 2, he has the burst, which rarely goes off, but on occasion, especially if you're going against a swarmy deck or deck that likes to get a lot of big forwards, Prompto can be nice. And again, he can be recovered off of things like Libertus, where Shantoto wouldn't be able to. But absolutely, the point is he's meant to deal with a bigger board, so if you want to swap him out for Shantoto to clear the board out, by all means. 2 copies of Glauca, who really, really shines in this deck. I like him quite a bit. He will further reduce the cost of all your Lightning forwards. Now, one thing to note is, with Tread specifically, he actually cancels out Regis's effect that will make Tread free. So if Glauca and Regis are on the field, you will have to pay 1 for Tread, which is a bit unfortunate. However, barring that, playing this Nyx for 1 Lightning CP is excellent. Paying Libertus for 3. Axis for 1. This Nyx only costs 2. That makes a huge, huge difference. I have had turns where, like I said, I'll have Regis and Glauc on the field. I was like, oh, I can play Nyx for 1 CP? That feels fantastic, so I do like that a lot. And then sometimes the power buff, of course, is relevant to help you push past something. Now, we're going to touch on our 2 primary targets for Nyx's second effect. Unfortunately, there aren't a ton of 5-cost Category 15 forwards. There's, of course, the other version of Regis, but the idea is to really not let this version of Regis get away anyway, so that one's kind of just... And the other problem, too, is, if you notice, no one here really has a good entry effect. Only this Nyx and this Libertus will do something on entry, so there isn't a whole lot of benefit to letting them die to then have the Regis come in to re-revive them. So, 2 copies of 5 CP Earth Arden, especially nowadays with Mill getting big and Famfrits flying around. This Arden is fantastic. You will happily sacrifice Arden to Famfrit to just have him come back at the end of the turn. He's very resilient. And again, doing a surprise coming out of the deck where you can do it on their turn even and say, now this forward not only can't attack on your turn, it won't be able to block on my turn. You could really mess with their math numbers and how many forwards they think they do or don't have. In particular, a play I did very recently, my opponent was using Behemoth K. It was my turn, and they put me to 5 damage, so I know, okay, I can't let the Behemoth K, right? So I used Nyx's effect, throw out 5, bring out the Arden, have it target the Behemoth K. The Behemoth K breaks any forward that targets it with an ability, right? But the ability still goes through, so Behemoth K can attack or block now, and then Arden breaks, but then Arden comes back at the end of the turn to then stop something else. Just felt amazing. Really like it. This card's really shined in this deck. And probably the most important card in the deck, maybe arguably even over Regis or Nyx, is Ignis. The reason because my original issue with Regis and Nyx was that, yes, they are sticky, they can survive, they can stick around. However, they don't really threaten anything, right? Nyx can, yeah, threaten to bring out a big guy, but he's also using that same ammo to protect himself. Regis can protect himself, but you know, he's not doing anything on attack. He's not removing a forward. They're just sticky bodies. So to get the most out of that sticky bodiness is to give all of them 1,000 in Brave and to make them attackers and to say, yeah, we're not going to threaten removal, but you can't get rid of us because of our cancel abilities. And then because we're Brave and 1,000 power, we're just going to keep pushing past you. Ignis makes such a difference in this deck. I have many times gone to combat, Nyx, pull out the Ignis. Ignis is then going to search you out of Noctus, and then immediately everyone's 1,000 and Brave more. And then Ignis has always had a great special, and it's especially brutal here because everything you control is a 15 forward, so you can easily hit values of 12,000, 20,000, 24,000. So to me, Ignis kind of makes the deck work. Really try not to throw away any copies, or if you do, you may want to fetch them back with Libertus or Kusith or something. Or Noctus. Went with the multicolored Noctus. There are a few choices. The Opus 7 Legend Noctus is still good, although he's really kind of better on the counter swing. I like this one because, one, it gave me another form of Earth CP, you know, because he's multi-element, you can pitch him for whatever. And two, I've had turns where I'll have Ignis and then Noctus, and then you can put out Regis, and now everything's cheaper, so you put out Tread for free, and then maybe you put out Nyx for 1 if you've got Glauca. And then as long as Noctus forms a party and attacks, everybody gets 2,000 power and haste. And then giving your whole board 2,000 power and haste plus their Brave from Ignis feels great. Because that Brave means, you know, you don't have this downside of, well, I swung out with everyone, so now I'm just going to get killed on the crackback. No. Everyone's still up and ready to defend. Really liked it in practice. Does give you another way of recursion. Can bring back his father, anyone you want. Just to kind of keep with the 15 theme, 1 copy of Ravis. He's a burst that may potentially save you because he says he'll dull, but he's really more here just because he fits the 15 theme, so he can be pulled back off Noctus, off of Libertus, you know, whoever, and then, of course, he can get 1 cheaper off of Glauca. You could switch this out if you would prefer something, you know, I don't know, more reliable or that quote-unquote does more, but I have enjoyed him as a one-of. And finally, rounding out our summons, single copy of Kusith, get you back a card, Ramu. I like this one just because of the dull, really, more than anything else. There's not really a way to combo the ping, so the 7K is sometimes relevant, sometimes not. And then he can give a lightning forward haste, so again, you can have a surprise if they think, okay, as long as they don't have any hasters, which the only other real, like, prominent wave haste is like Nyx, Noctus, so he can give us a prize haste, which is nice. 2 copies of Remora. Unfortunately, you'll always pay full price for this because there's no crystals in here, but I really love that card as a combat trick. Again, with all your guys being brave because of Ignis, they're going to come in, they will try to take out Ignis, they will try to do whatever, and Remora just says, no, I'm going to buff up the Ignis and then take out your 7k or less. Really good 2-for-1 swing. And finally, Hekaton Kyre. This is, again, one of your other ways of quote-unquote board wiping them. It has to be used only on your turn, which is unfortunate, but doing 8k to the entire field is no joke, especially if you can keep your guys alive, which I've done before. I remember once, I think it was just Regis on the board, and he wasn't damage 3 yet, so he's just an 8k. So I cast Hekaton Kyre, and they had a Opus 9 Vein, which was a 9k. So it was going to wipe out everything except that Vein. So I cast both Hekaton Kyre and Remora. I drained the Vein to bump up Regis, so it ended up I just wiped their side of the board and kept mine alive. It was expensive, but hey, ultimately won the game on it, so it was worth it. So here we go. Here is Earth, Lightning, Category 15 KingsGlaive. Like I said, I've really enjoyed this variant with the Earth. Ignis has made, and especially, again, it just gives it that little extra oomph it needed, because I do think overall they are missing a threat package, again, something that can continuously remove or hurt something, because for the most part they're just sticky. Well, Ignis helps make the most of being sticky, and you know what he says. That's it! I've come up with a new recipe. Let me know what you think, and I will see you next time. Bye! Hey, don't think I forgot about all you Mono Lightning fans out there. So this was the original version of KingsGlaive I came up with. This is a Mono Lightning version. I will say right up front, I think the Earth Lightning version is overall stronger. Like I said, what unfortunately the KingsGlaives lack is just kind of constant removal. And I feel like Ignis solved a lot of those problems with the Earth variant. However, this is the original Mono Lightning variant. I've added everything you've seen before is on this left side, and kind of the new cards for Mono Lightning are on the right side. I'll have both deck lists in the link below, so you can check them out there at your leisure. 1 copy of President Shinra to search out Reno or Rude. Their effects are irrelevant, it's just a way to help you ramp out backups. 2 copies of Lulu, probably the best reason to play Mono Lightning is everyone will naturally be bigger. Nyx now gets to 8. Regis will be, 9 base, you can get up to 10, which I really like. The summons are a little different. Went with Aldromech to try to take out those smaller active forwards, maybe higher if you push damage. Bahamut Zero is always a great finisher card. This Odin is okay. I haven't found as much use for it as I would like. Maybe that's just been the people I've been playing. Fel Thanos gives you kind of an alternative quote-unquote board wipe to Shantoto or Prompto, which is nice. And in particular, because he hits active forwards, you can swing in with all of your guys to make sure they're all dull, and that way they won't get hit by him. Drop the Fel Thanos. Boom. My buddy Steven and I have kind of talked about this card. He still finds it to be too expensive and a little too situational, which I do agree with. Sometimes it is hard to line up, and in particular, it's almost a card you want to play when you're either ahead or even, which kind of goes against what you want in a board wipe. Usually board wipes are what you want to do when you're behind, but the thing is, if you're behind, so let's say, they've had a bigger board, you've been struggling, in order for him to go off effectively, they have to have active forwards. Well, if you're behind and they've been swinging in for damage, there's a good chance most of their forwards are going to be dull. So as a board wipe, he then is only going to hit maybe a few targets, maybe whatever they played in their main phase too. So I do agree he's kind of finicky in that nature, but again, in the Mono Lightning list, it kind of works. Vayne, I wanted to try out, but I honestly haven't gotten to use him once. I mean, in theory, he should be really good, right? Your guys are permanently +2. Their team is permanently -2. They have to do something to get rid of the Vayne. You can sack off some of the KingsGlaives, although, again, you're not going to get their effects unless it's Crow, so that's unfortunate. Or no, does he remove him from the game? Yeah, never mind. It doesn't even matter. So you wouldn't even get Crow's effect, so ignore that. This version of Aranea, you could do the 4 CP Aranea. That's always been a good one with Glauca. Now she has a few other targets, but I wanted to try this one, and since it is Mono Lightning, this basically does guarantee she's going to replace herself in hand. You could absolutely do the other Aranea, though. That one's solid as well. And then really the biggest difference I wanted to talk about was Arden. He was the original, this is the Nyx target, right? You sacrifice your 5, you pull out Arden. And it just bums me out that I just don't find this card to be that good, because he's one of my favorite Final Fantasy villains. I've always really enjoyed his character. I think his look is really unique. I think most of the cards he's gotten have been interesting, at least, but dumping your hand is just too big of a downside. And as I said in my review with Eureka, your opponent is always going to choose the least damaging options for them. Whether that's, they'll just pick the few, whatever characters they want to get rid of, they'll take however much damage. I mean, this guy got resolved the other day for, I think, 7 total. Like, they dumped 6 cards from hand, and then, Arden's +1, so 7. And their opponent, okay, well, I'll cherry pick, I'll take 3 points of damage, which doesn't kill me, and then I'll get rid of these 4 characters, whether they be the forwards or the backups that hurt me the least. And then they just proceed to win the next turn because your opponent has no hand now. You've just given them a green light of, hey, do whatever you want for me. So I've seen some interesting ideas with Arden out there, like from Alex Hancock's. He's got them in kind of a water build where you can actually draw cards back, so you're not just sitting there with an empty hand. But in the KingsGlaive, he hasn't worked out. Anytime I've used him, I've never won the game off of him. It's always just, thrown me into the gutter. So there you go. Again, I do think the Earth Lightning is stronger, but if you wanted to play a more mono lightning version, I think this one is roughly about as good as it's going to get. So let me know what you think, and I'll see you next time for Honor and Glory.